He left me to die with our triplets. During my cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again. The morning sunlight broke through the hospital blinds like sharp knives cutting through darkness. Sarah Martinez sat on the cold examination table, her hands trembling as they held the medical report that would change everything. The words seemed to dance on the paper, refusing to make sense. Stage 3 breast cancer. The doctor's voice sounded far away, like someone speaking underwater. Sarah could only think about the 3 tiny faces waiting for her at home. Her triplets were only 6 months old. They needed their mother. They needed her to be strong. But how could she be strong when her whole world was falling apart? The door burst open and David walked in, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his cologne filling the room. He looked annoyed, like this medical emergency had interrupted something important. Sarah looked up at him with tears in her eyes, searching for the man who had promised to love her forever just 2 years ago. "What's going on?" David asked, checking his phone while he spoke. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "I have cancer, David, stage 3. The doctor says we need to start treatment right away." She watched his face change, not with concern or fear, but with something else. It was like watching a door close. His jaw tightened and he took a step back from her, as if cancer was something he could catch. This is a lot to process," he said, still looking at his phone. Sarah reached out for his hand, but he pulled away. "David, I need you. The babies need you. We can fight this together." He shook his head slowly. "I need some air. I'll be back." But Sarah knew from the way he walked out that door, he wasn't coming back. Not really. That night, she sat alone in their bedroom, feeding one baby while the other 2 cried in their cribs. David hadn't come home. His side of the bed stayed cold and empty. She called him 12 times, but he never answered. When he finally walked through the door at 3 in the morning, he smelled like perfume that wasn't hers. The next few weeks were the hardest of Sarah's life. The chemotherapy started immediately, making her so sick she could barely stand. Her hair began falling out in clumps, covering her pillow each morning like autumn leaves. She would sit in the bathroom crying silently so the babies wouldn't hear, pulling strands of hair from the drain. David became a ghost in their home. He left before sunrise and came back after midnight. When she begged him to help with the triplets, he would roll his eyes and say he was working hard to pay the medical bills. But Sarah found receipts in his pockets for expensive dinners at restaurants she'd never been to. She found charges on their credit card for jewelry she'd never received. One night, she confronted him. "Who is she?" Sarah asked, holding up a receipt for a hotel room. David didn't even try to deny it. "You're dying anyway," he said, his words cutting deeper than any surgeon's knife. "Why should I waste my life taking care of you and those screaming brats? I'm young. I have a future. You don't." Sarah felt something break inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with cancer. "Those screaming brats are your children," she whispered. David laughed, a cold sound that made her skin crawl. "Not for much longer. I'm filing for divorce. And don't even think about fighting me. No judge is going to give custody to a cancer patient who can't even stand up without help." He packed his bags that night while Sarah sat on the floor, too weak to stop him, holding her babies close. Before he left, he turned to her one last time. "You're already as good as dead, Sarah. Do everyone a favor and make it quick." The door slammed behind him, leaving Sarah alone with 3 crying babies and a body that was failing her. She thought that was rock bottom. She was wrong. 2 days later, Sarah discovered David had emptied their joint bank account. Every penny they had saved for the baby's future was gone. He had canceled her health insurance, leaving her with mounting medical bills she couldn't pay. He had even called her employer and told them she had quit, cutting off her only source of income. Sarah's sister Maria found her collapsed on the kitchen floor the next morning, the babies screaming in their high chairs. Maria rushed her to the hospital where doctors said she was severely dehydrated and malnourished. "You can't keep going like this," the doctor told Maria quietly. "She needs help or she won't survive the month." Maria moved in that day, bringing her savings and her fierce determination. She fed the babies, cleaned the house, and held Sarah's hand through every chemotherapy session. When Sarah lost all her hair, Maria shaved her own head in solidarity. "We're in this together," she said, tears streaming down her face. "David might have abandoned you, but I never will." The treatment was brutal. Sarah spent days vomiting until there was nothing left, her body rejecting even water. Her bones ached like they were being crushed from the inside. Some nights she would lie awake listening to her babies cry, wanting desperately to comfort them but unable to move. Maria would find her in the morning, tears dried on her cheeks, whispering apologies to children too young to understand. But Sarah refused to give up. Every time she wanted to quit, she would look at her triplets and find strength she didn't know existed. She named them her warriors. Emma, her little fighter who never stopped smiling. Noah, her gentle soul who would pat her face when she cried. And Lily, her fierce protector who would crawl to her and refuse to leave her side. They became her reason to live when David had given her every reason to die. 6 months into treatment, Sarah received divorce papers. David was claiming abandonment, saying she had refused to care for their children. He was seeking full custody and demanding she pay him alimony. The audacity of it made Maria so angry she punched a hole in the wall. But Sarah just laughed, a hollow sound that scared her sister. "Let him have his papers," Sarah said. "I have something more important to fight for." She was right. While David was building his case on lies, Sarah was building her strength on truth. She documented everything. Every treatment, every small victory, every moment with her children. She took photos of herself reading to them even when she could barely keep her eyes open. She recorded videos of them taking their first steps while she cheered from her wheelchair. She created a paper trail of love that no court could ignore. The divorce hearing came on a cold December morning. Sarah walked into the courtroom using a cane, her body thin but her spirit unbreakable. David sat across from her with his new girlfriend, Rebecca, a woman who looked like Sarah used to look before cancer stole her curves and her confidence. David's lawyer painted a picture of a dying woman who couldn't care for herself, let alone 3 children. But Sarah's lawyer, a woman named Grace who had taken the case pro bono after hearing Sarah's story, had evidence David never expected. Phone records showing he hadn't called to check on the children once. Bank statements proving he had stolen money meant for their care. Medical records documenting that Sarah had never missed a pediatric appointment, even during her worst days of chemo. The judge's face grew darker with every piece of evidence. When David tried to speak, claiming he had left for the children's own good, the judge cut him off. "Mr. Martinez, you abandoned a cancer patient and 3 infants. You stole from them. You tried to destroy them. I'm not only denying your custody request, but I'm ordering you to pay child support and medical expenses. And if you come within 500 feet of Mrs. Martinez or the children, you'll be arrested." David's face turned purple with rage. As they left the courthouse, he cornered Sarah in the parking lot. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You might have won today, but you're still dying. And when you're gone, those kids will have nobody." Sarah looked him in the eye, no longer the frightened woman he had left to die. "You're wrong, David. They have me. And I'm not going anywhere." She was right. Against every odd, Sarah's cancer went into remission. The doctors called it miraculous, but Sarah knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was determination. It was love. It was the power of a mother who refused to leave her children with a legacy of abandonment. She had fought death itself and won, not with weapons or medicine alone, but with the unbreakable will of a woman who had been left to die but chosen to live. 5 years passed like pages in a book, each one filled with small victories and large joys. Sarah rebuilt her life brick by brick. She started a small online business selling handmade crafts, working from home so she could be with her children. The triplets grew into beautiful, confident 5-year-olds who knew nothing of their father's cruelty. Sarah had never spoken ill of David to them, simply saying Daddy had to go away. They didn't need to know how he had tried to destroy them all. They only needed to know they were loved, completely and unconditionally. Sarah's hair grew back, darker and curlier than before, what her hairdresser called chemo curls. She gained back the weight she had lost, her body finding its strength again. She still had scars, both visible and hidden, but she wore them like badges of honor. They were proof of battles fought and won. Maria had stayed close, becoming more than an aunt to the triplets. She was their second mother, their protector, their cheerleader. Together, the sisters had created a family stronger than any traditional nuclear unit. They had learned that family wasn't about blood or marriage certificates. It was about who showed up when the world fell apart. It was about who held your hair when you were sick and who held your hand when you were scared. It was about who stayed when leaving would have been easier. Sarah had also found an unexpected community in her cancer support group, women who understood the dual battle of fighting disease and abandonment. They called themselves the Phoenix Sisters, women who had risen from the ashes of their former lives to create something new and beautiful. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah would wake early to make breakfast, the kitchen filled with laughter and the chaos of 3 5-year-olds arguing over cereal choices. She would walk them to kindergarten, their small hands in hers, their backpacks bouncing with each step. She had returned to work part-time as a medical billing specialist, a job she could do mostly from home. In the evenings, she would help with homework, read bedtime stories, and tuck 3 little bodies into bed with kisses and promises of tomorrow's adventures. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was beautiful in its imperfection. Every day was a gift she had almost been denied. Every laugh, every tear, every tantrum was a treasure. She had learned to find joy in the mundane, peace in the chaos, and strength in the struggle. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kids were at school, and Sarah was working on billing codes when her phone rang. The area code was familiar, but the number wasn't. "Hello?" she answered, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, she heard a woman crying. "Is this Sarah Martinez?" The woman asked between sobs. "Yes, who is this?" Sarah replied, her instincts immediately on alert. "My name is Rebecca. I was with David, your ex-husband. I need to talk to you. Please, it's about your children." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She agreed to meet Rebecca at a coffee shop the next day, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. Rebecca looked nothing like the confident woman from the divorce hearing 5 years ago. She was thin, too thin, with bruises poorly hidden under makeup. Her hands shook as she held her coffee cup. "I'm sorry," she started, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. For being with him when he was married to you. For sitting in that courtroom. For believing his lies." Sarah said nothing, waiting. Rebecca continued, her voice breaking. "He told me you were crazy, that you had abandoned the children, that the cancer was fake, just a way to get sympathy. I believed him because I wanted to. He was charming and successful and everything I thought I wanted." She lifted her sleeve, revealing purple bruises in the shape of fingers. "But I learned the truth. The same way you did." "What does this have to do with my children?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Rebecca pulled out a folder from her purse. "David's in trouble. Big trouble. He's been embezzling from his company. The FBI is investigating. He's going to prison, Sarah. But before they arrested him, he said something. He said he was going to come for the kids, that they were his insurance policy, that you owed him for ruining his life." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "When?" she asked. "He made bail yesterday," Rebecca whispered. "I came straight here. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness or your trust. But those babies don't deserve what he's planning. He's desperate and dangerous. You need to know." Sarah stood up, her mind already forming a plan. "Thank you for telling me," she said to Rebecca. "Get yourself somewhere safe. And Rebecca, it's not your fault. David is a master manipulator. He fooled us both." She left the coffee shop and immediately called Maria, then her lawyer, then the police. Within hours, she had a restraining order and police protection. She picked up the children from school herself, holding them a little tighter, their innocent chatter about finger painting and playground games a stark contrast to the storm brewing. That night, she sat the triplets down and told them in simple terms that they needed to be careful. That if they saw a man they didn't know, they should run to their teacher. She hated stealing their innocence, but their safety was more important. 2 days later, David appeared. Sarah was loading the kids into the car after school when she saw him across the parking lot. He looked different. Desperate, unshaven, his expensive suit replaced with wrinkled clothes. His eyes were wild, darting between her and the children. Emma saw him first. "Mommy, who's that man?" she asked, pressing closer to Sarah. "Nobody important, baby." "Get in the car," Sarah said, her voice calm despite her terror. But David was already moving toward them. "Those are my kids," he shouted. "You can't keep them from me. I have rights." The school security guard, alerted by Sarah's lawyer, was already moving to intercept him. Parents were grabbing their children, pulling them away from the scene. Teachers were calling 911. "Stay away from us, David," Sarah called out, standing between him and the car where her children huddled. "You gave up your rights when you left us to die." David laughed, and the sound unhinged. "You were supposed to die. You were supposed to be gone, and I was supposed to get everything. The insurance money, the sympathy, the fresh start. But you couldn't even do that, right, could you? You had to survive and ruin everything." The police arrived then, officers approaching David carefully. He was screaming now, years of carefully constructed lies crumbling around him. "She turned them against me. She poisoned them. Those are my children, my blood. She's nothing but a walking corpse who should have had the decency to die." The arrest was swift. David was taken away in handcuffs, still screaming about his rights, about the unfairness of it all. Sarah stood in the parking lot, her children safe in the car, watching the man who had once promised to love her in sickness and in health being driven away. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, no anger, just emptiness where he used to exist in her heart. The triplets were crying, scared by the shouting and the police. Sarah got in the car and turned to face them. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said. "Sometimes adults make bad choices and have to face consequences. But you're safe. You'll always be safe with me." That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat with Maria and cried. Not for David, but for the woman she used to be. The woman who had believed in fairy tale love and happily ever after. The woman who had trusted so completely that she never saw the betrayal coming. "You know what the funny thing is?" Sarah said through her tears. He was right about one thing. The old Sarah did die. The cancer killed her, or maybe he did. But something else was born. Someone stronger. Someone who knows that the only person you can really count on is yourself. Maria hugged her sister tight. "That's not true. You can count on me. The kids can count on you. We're family, the real kind. The kind that stays." The trial made headlines. Executive attempts to reclaim children after abandoning cancer-stricken wife, read one paper. From boardroom to courtroom, the fall of David Martinez read another. Sarah testified not with anger but with facts. She presented the evidence of abandonment, of theft, of cruelty. She spoke about the nights she spent alone, sick from chemo, while her babies cried. She talked about finding the strength to survive, not despite her children, but because of them. When asked if she had anything to say to David, she simply said, "You left me to die with our triplets during my cancer. Years later, you never expected to see me again. But here I am. Here we are. We survived without you. We thrived without you. And will continue to live beautiful, full lives without you." David was sentenced to 8 years in prison for embezzlement, attempted kidnapping, and violating the restraining order. As he was led away, he looked at Sarah one last time. She didn't look back. She was already walking away toward her children, toward her future, toward the life she had built from the ashes of his betrayal. The title of her story, "He left me to die with our triplets during my cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again," had become her truth. But it wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of resurrection. It was proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well. It's surviving what was meant to destroy you. It's thriving when someone expected you to die. A year after the trial, Sarah stood in front of a room full of cancer patients, sharing her story. She had become a counselor specifically for people dealing with both cancer and relationship trauma. "They tell you cancer changes everything," she said to the room. "They're right. It strips away the unnecessary, reveals the truth, and shows you who really loves you. My cancer showed me that my husband didn't love me, but it also showed me that I loved myself enough to fight. It showed me that my children needed a warrior, not a victim. It showed me that family isn't about DNA or marriage licenses. It's about who shows up when showing up is hard. A woman in the front row raised her hand. "How did you forgive him?" she asked. Sarah smiled sadly. "I didn't. Some things are unforgivable. But I let go of the anger, not for him, but for me. Carrying hatred is like carrying poison. It only hurts the person holding it. I chose to put it down. I chose to fill my hands with love instead. Love for my children, love for my sister, love for the life I almost lost. That's not forgiveness. That's freedom." The room nodded, understanding, flowing between people who had walked similar paths. Sarah continued, "The title of my story could have been my ending. He left me to die with our triplets during my cancer could have been written on my tombstone. But I added a second part. Years later, he never expected to see me again. Because I lived. Because I refused to be erased. Because sometimes the greatest victory is simply still being here." The triplets, now 7 years old, were waiting in the lobby with Maria. They had made a banner that said, "Our mom is a superhero," with hand-drawn pictures of Sarah with a cape. When she walked out, they ran to her, all talking at once about their day at school, their art projects, their plans for the weekend. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary, precious life stuff. Sarah gathered them in her arms, breathing in their little kid smell of crayons and playground dirt. "Mommy, why were you talking to those people?" Lily asked. "I was telling them a story," Sarah replied. "A story about how sometimes bad things happen, but we can still make good things grow from them." "Like flowers from dirt?" Noah asked, always her little philosopher. "Exactly like that, baby. Exactly like that." That evening, as Sarah tucked her children into bed, Emma asked, "Mommy, will you ever get sick again?" Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart. Nobody knows what the future holds. But I promise you this. No matter what happens, you will always be loved. You will always be cared for. You will never be alone. Because we have Aunt Maria," Lily added. "Yes, and because we have each other. We're a team, remember? The 4 of us against the world." She kissed each of them good night, lingering an extra moment with each child, memorizing their faces, their smiles, the way they smelled like sunshine and innocence. Sarah stood in her bathroom looking at her reflection. The scars were still there. The ports from chemo had left marks. Her body bore the evidence of battles fought. But she no longer saw them as ugly. They were her war paint, her medals of honor. They told the story of a woman who refused to die when death seemed certain. They whispered of strength found in the darkest moments. They sang of love that conquered abandonment. She thought about David, rotting in a prison cell, and felt nothing. He was a chapter in her story, but not the ending. He was the villain who had inadvertently created a hero. Without his cruelty, she might never have discovered her own strength. Without his abandonment, she might never have learned that she was enough, all by herself. The truth was, cancer had been easier to fight than the betrayal. Cancer was just cells gone wrong. It had no malice, no choice, no cruelty. It simply was. But David had chosen to leave. He had chosen to be cruel. He had looked at his dying wife and infant children and chosen himself. That was a pain no medicine could cure. But she had cured it anyway, not with pills or procedures, but with purpose. Every day she chose to get up was a victory. Every laugh she shared with her children was a rebellion against the fate David had tried to write for her. Every breath she took was a declaration that she was still here, still fighting, still winning. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. She had left David's orbit entirely, moved to another state, started over. "Thank you," the message read, "for showing me that survival is possible, for showing me that we can write new endings to our stories." Sarah smiled and typed back, "We're all stronger than we know. Sometimes it just takes a monster to show us we're warriors." She put the phone down and looked at the photo on her nightstand. Her and the triplets at the beach last summer, all of them laughing as waves crashed around their feet. It was her favorite picture, not because they looked perfect, but because they looked happy, genuinely, purely, completely happy. 5 more years passed. The triplets were 12 now, on the cusp of teenage years. They knew their story, the age-appropriate version of it. They knew their father had made bad choices and was in prison. They knew their mother had been sick and gotten better. They knew Aunt Maria was family by choice, not chance. They had grown into remarkable young people. Emma, with her fierce protection of anyone being bullied. Noah, with his gentle heart and love of books. Lily, with her determination to right every wrong she encountered. They were living proof that children could thrive with one dedicated parent instead of suffering with two where one was toxic. Sarah had expanded her counseling practice, written a book about her experience, and started a foundation for single parents battling cancer. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. She had taken David's cruelty and turned it into compassion for others walking similar paths. She had taken the title of her story, "He left me to die with our triplets during my cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again," and made it a rallying cry for survivors everywhere. The story that was supposed to be her ending had become her beginning. The abandonment that was supposed to destroy her had instead revealed her indestructible core. One day, a letter arrived from the prison. David's handwriting was on the envelope. Sarah stared at it for a long moment, then threw it in the trash unopened. She didn't need to read it. Whether it contained apologies or accusations didn't matter. That chapter was closed. She had no space in her life for his words, his excuses, his existence. He had left her to die, but she had chosen to live. He had expected her to disappear, but she had become more visible than ever. He had tried to erase her story, but she had written it in permanent ink across the hearts of everyone she helped. That afternoon, she picked up the triplets from school, like always. They piled into the car, all talking over each other about their day. Emma had made the soccer team. Noah had won the spelling bee. Lily had stood up to a bully who was picking on a younger kid. Normal preteen victories that meant everything. As they drove home, Noah asked, "Mom, do you ever think about what life would be like if things had been different?" Sarah glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Different how?" "If you hadn't gotten sick. If our dad had stayed." Sarah pulled into their driveway and turned to face her children. "You know what? I used to think about that all the time, but then I realized something. If things had been different, I might not have become who I am. You might not have become who you are. We might have lived an easier life, but not necessarily a better one. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations." Emma reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "We're glad you're our mom. Not just because you survived, but because you showed us how to be strong." Lily added, "And because you never gave up on us, even when giving up would have been easier." Noah, always the quiet one, simply said, "We love you, Mom, all of you, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts." Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears, happy tears. "You three are my greatest victory," she said. "Not surviving cancer, not rebuilding our life. You, the three of you choosing to love and trust and hope despite everything. That's the real miracle." As they walked into their house, their home, their sanctuary, Sarah thought about the title of her story one more time. "He left me to die with our triplets during my cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again." It was true. David never expected to see her again. He had counted on her death, banked on her disappearance, built his future on her absence. But life had other plans. She had other plans, and those plans didn't include dying. They included living, fighting, surviving, and ultimately thriving. They included raising 3 incredible children who would change the world with their compassion. They included helping other women find their strength in their darkest moments. They included writing a new story, one where the abandoned woman becomes the hero, where the victim becomes the victor, where the one left to die becomes the one who shows others how to live. The sun was setting as Sarah started dinner, the kitchen filled with homework and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life. This wasn't the life she had planned when she walked down the aisle in white, promising to love and honor until death do them part. But it was the life she had built from the rubble of broken promises. And it was good. It was so very good. Because sometimes the best stories aren't the ones without pain. They're the ones where pain becomes power, where suffering becomes strength, where abandonment becomes independence. Her story, titled, "He Left Me to Die with Our Triplets During My Cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again," wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation. It was about the alchemy of turning poison into medicine, darkness into light, betrayal into triumph. As she served a dinner to her children, listening to them tease each other and laugh, Sarah realized the ultimate truth. David had been wrong about everything. She wasn't as good as dead. She was more alive than she had ever been. The triplets weren't brats. They were blessings. And his leaving wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Because sometimes when someone leaves you to die, they're actually setting you free to live. And live she did, with every breath, every heartbeat, every moment a testimony to the power of a mother's love and a woman's determination to write her own ending. The title, "He Left Me to Die with Our Triplets." During my cancer, years later, he never expected to see me again, would forever be her truth, but it would not be her limitation. It would be her liberation, her declaration of independence, her proof that no one else gets to write the final chapter of your story. Only you do. And Sarah's final chapter wasn't about dying. It was about living so fully, so fiercely, so completely that death itself had to step back and admire her refusal to surrender. The story could have ended with abandonment, with death, with tragedy. Instead, it ended with a mother tucking 3 children into bed, safe and loved. It ended with a woman looking in the mirror and seeing a warrior instead of a victim. It ended with the knowledge that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things we become. And in the end, that's all any of us can hope for, to take our pain and make it purposeful, to take our scars and make them beautiful, to take our story, no matter how it starts, and write an ending that makes the beginning worth it. Sarah had done all of that and more. She had taken the title, "He Left Me to Die with Our Triplets During My Cancer. Years later, he never expected to see me again, and turned it into a song of survival that would echo through generations, inspiring anyone who heard it to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep living, no matter who leaves them behind.